And nowhere since 9/11, anywhere in the national security apparatus of the United States, in any national security document, has an enemy actually been identified. Yet our generals and admirals and our civilian leadership through 4 administrations have sent American military personnel into combat zones with no understanding of the threat. And so you cannot, number one, defeat an enemy you don't identify. Number two, you can't begin to formulate strategies for victory if you don't know who the enemy is.
Yeah, it seems like the only thing they really are definitely going after was the leadership of the so-called movement. That's all I
Right,
remember going. Being that part of the agency, we'd always go after the high value targets, and that was really it.
right.
'Cause-
And so, for instance, if we just for a second, I'll give you an analogy domestically. So the prominent Islamic organizations in America, as a matter of fact, are hostile, and they are part of an identified movement, what they call the global Islamic movement or the Islamic movement. And in the United States and North America, and in Europe, primarily led by the Muslim Brotherhood, but there are other leaders, there are other individual movements, Tablighi Jamaat, Jamaati Islami, and others. But the point is that's not the relevant part. The point is the prominent Islamic organizations, the ones that work with churches and synagogues, the ones that work with state and local police and the FBI and CIA, the ones that work inside the DOD, the ones that are advising in the Civil Rights Division of DHS, they're hostile. They're no different than the guys on the ground in Afghanistan right now as far as their objectives. Their objectives are exactly the same. But these organizations, primarily in the United States, day to day operate in the nonviolent realm. But if we look at all of the attacks in America since and including 9/11, you can trace the support, the direct support for those attacks, including for the 9/11 hijackers, to organizations and individuals inside this movement. So whether it's the Muslim American Society, the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Islamic Society of North America, or any of the other Muslim Brotherhood jihadi organizations, they've been tied directly to people that are going out and doing violence, whether it's the guys that came to Garland, Texas to kill people at a Draw Muhammad cartoon contest, the Fort Hood shooter who killed 14 people and wounded many others, the Boston Marathon bombers, the guy in Chattanooga, Tennessee, who killed 4 Marines and a Navy sailor. Whether it's, you just pick any one of those, and you can tie them back to a massive movement in the United States. And what is the national level, national security organizations, what are they doing? Nothing. As a matter of fact, they're not just doing nothing, their actions actually help advance the movement. And what are local and state police officials doing? Nothing. What are governors doing? Nothing. Some of them don't know, but at this point, if you don't know, you've got to ask a question: how unprofessional are you? So now take that and let's talk about Afghanistan. I just want to reiterate this. Since 9/11, nowhere in the national security apparatus, none of the military service academies, none at the staff NCO and officer programs are they teaching what Sharia is and what it actually, how our adversaries use it as they prosecute this war. Because whether we talk about Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, the Islamic State, we look at the Iranian Constitution, we look at the Iraqi Constitution, we look at the Afghan Constitution, we look at the Egyptian Constitution, we look at what the Muslim Brotherhood bylaws say, and et cetera. What do they all say? Almost identically, they want an Islamic State under Allah's divine law, Sharia.
Yep.
And our war fighting doctrine says Therefore, if we're going to engage them in combat, we have to know, we begin by taking them at their word and then actually studying their doctrine. And as you mentioned, the number one comment, from guys that come through, especially guys that have been downrange, first of all, their minds are blown. But guys that have been deployed into any of the AORs, they say, if we had known this information, and specifically the information about how Sharia actually guides their behavior in combat, they would have brought back more guys alive, number one. And number two, they would have known how to screw with the bad guys in ways in combat more effectively and how to engage them more effectively.
So why do you think it's not being taught?
Say that again?
Why do you think it's not being taught? Why do you think the military is avoiding teaching it?
Well, there are several reasons. The primary reason is because the individuals and the organizations that our generals and our admirals lean on to teach them about this stuff are Muslim Brotherhood organizations. So I could walk through as many examples as you want. You let me know if you want to do that. But that's the first piece. So whether it's at the State Department, Treasury Department, the national security staffs, inside the halls of Congress, we can go back to 2001 and 2, and who's testifying before Congress? Leaders of the Muslim American Society, the Islamic Society of North America. These people that we know by name, whether it's Syed or Muzamil Siddiqui or fill in the Mohammed el-Sanusi, testifying before Congress. The only difference between them and the Taliban guys that have done what they've done, or Al-Qaeda or ISIS, is that these guys wear suits, but they are on the exact same team. They communicate with each other, and they are at the strategic level crushing us. And let me just make two big points. Number one, the OIC at the international level, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, is the largest voting bloc in the United Nations. And it's made up of every Muslim nation on the planet. They have 57 member states, and they operate at the head of state level. And every 3 years they come together and they make decisions that are binding on the global Muslim community. And in 1990, they approved. In 1993, they served something called the Cairo Declaration on Human Rights in Islam. And it literally says, we, the entire Muslim world, only understand human rights through the lens of Sharia. And for those who don't know, authoritative Sharia specifically mandates that when Muslims have the ability and the material resources to wage jihad, they must wage war against the non-Muslim population until they convert to Islam, submit to Islam, and pay the non-Muslim poll tax. That's it.
Yep.
Sharia mandates that those that leave Islam be killed. Sharia mandates that those who commit adultery be stoned to death. Those that are homosexuals be killed. Sharia authorizes Muslims to take sex slaves. Sharia authorizes torture of non-Muslim. Sharia authorizes, Muhammad himself participated in beheading up to 900 Jews after the Battle of the Trench. So there's no such thing as a version of Islam other than that.